Now we know. All right.
We access that, man.
I will, it will be loaded onto this computer, and then we will upload it probably to YouTube and put it on the St. Margaret's YouTube page. So it will stay, it'll just be an easy link. So we'll send out the link to the congregation, to the YouTube video, so that everybody can kind of be aware of it. So, all right, let us start with a prayer. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, you will hold us in your palm throughout our entire lives. You create us with such wonder and wisdom, and you create us with such joy. And you continue to hold us throughout our lives and even beyond this life. We ask, Lord, that as we consider and think about our mortality and the plans that we have to make for ourselves, but also for our families, we ask for your guidance and your wisdom. Free us from the fear that might arrest us, and instead give us a heart of love as we do this work together. Be with all of those in our families, those who we see no longer, but know that are with you now. And be with us as we plan for the celebrations of our own lives. It is in your name we pray. Amen. Well, welcome everybody. This workshop has kind of been a long time in coming. I've been meaning to do it for 5 years, and then COVID happened, and I've been really wanting to offer this. This is something that I've done at my previous congregation. Many of you know that my father was a funeral director for 40 years, and so planning for your funeral was always something that was kind of just in the water in my house. But so when I became a priest, Dad and I used to do this together, and he would do it from the perspective of the funeral director and give all of those kind of things, and I would do it from the priest perspective, and we just always thought that we made a really good team. Ironically, he never filled out the form that I actually created. He had a list of things, and that was kind of fun. To go through after he died, because as a funeral director, he had very specific ideas about what he wanted, and he didn't seem to think about what the cost was to any of those things. But we got it done, and it was wonderful. But even then, we still had to. I mean, even though he had the list, like, we still had to. There was a lot of planning, and there's always a lot of planning that goes into a funeral, no matter what. So the goal of this series is really to help you know what is there, and for you to be invited to do as much as you can now, and between now and when you go, and then because it is a gift not just to you, but it is a gift for your family. Let me get that to sit down again. Because how many of you have had to plan a funeral for a loved one? Yeah, right. It ain't fun, but it certainly is a little bit easier if you can know ahead of time, right? So we're just going to kind of go through this form that we have. This is a form that we have here at St. Margaret's in the office. So if you lose this one, we have it so you can come. We encourage you to fill it out, and as much as you can. This is also a living document. Just because you wrote it down doesn't mean you can't change anything, right? You can change it as much or as little as you want. And we do ask that if you decide that you want to have your funeral at St. Margaret's, that you make a copy of this for us. And we have a file of people who have already done that, and we keep them on file in perpetuity. So please, remember to do that as well. And then also remember to keep your own copy as well. That seems self-explanatory, but I want to highlight that too. Keep a copy for yourself, give it to your kids, your spouse, your loved ones, and make sure that they know exactly where these documents are as we go through it. So the first thing you need to know is that in the Episcopal Church, our liturgy of burial is an Easter liturgy. It is always about resurrection. This, I think people get afraid of this because it feels final, but that's not what we believe. It's not final, Megan. It is. Well, we had a conversation about this. That's why I'm recently. It's not final. This is the transition into whatever is to come. So you can look at these plans as kind of what you would do if you were planning a vacation and you were making plans to go to whatever is whatever trip you're going on next, right? So but we believe at our core that death is not the end. It's always an Easter liturgy. And I will say, I've had a number of colleagues who have said, and a number of parishioners who have said, that it was actually an Episcopal funeral that brought them into the Episcopal Church, because it wasn't about hellfire and brimstone. It wasn't about doom and gloom. It was always about resurrection and hope. And that is what the framework of that liturgy is. Okay. So, so again, remember too, making these plans are to help your loved ones live into that resurrection piece, knowing that you are going to be they are going to be celebrating you as you are making this transition into the fullness of God's presence, right? And yes, that is sad. It always is, because it's a loss, right? But that's the thing about Christian, about what we believe about death is it is that paradox of both sadness and grief, but also joy. And we hold those things in tension. And I think that's one of the things I love about our prayer book, and in this liturgy in particular, is that it holds those two things in tension, right? So one piece that I think a lot of my colleagues, certainly as I was preparing for this, I was reminded of it. But our prayer book actually encourages us to make these plans. On page 445. And there's not a lot of things in the prayer book that says that the minister is supposed to teach you, but this is one of those things that we're supposed to teach you, is about how to plan for your liturgy. It says the minister of the congregation is directed to instruct the people from time to time about the duty of Christian parents to make prudent provision for the well-being of their families, and of all persons to make wills while they are in health, arranging for the disposal of their temporal goods, not neglecting if they are able to leave bequests for religious and charitable uses. So, I mean, we're talking about planning our funeral, but also this is encouraging you to be also aware of the gifts that you have and how you will prepare for those gifts to be given to the people that you love as well. And again, we're not going to cover that specifically today. We're going to talk about that probably in our fourth week with Ketty. But just so you know, that's in our prayer book, right? Like, that means it's important. It means that there's something behind that we really believe. So don't forget St. Margaret's in your will. I'm going to say that now. We'll say it a couple more times later. Also, living wills, advanced care directives. Linda Palmer is going to be with us next week. She's going to talk a little bit about that. And And also, if you have questions about this, know that I'm giving you this as the beginning of a conversation between you and me. Like, however I can be helpful in you planning this, however I can be helpful in walking with you through this, and also when that time comes, you know that the church is going to be with you and walk with you through that as well. So again, this is kind of a beginning of a conversation that I hope that we will continue to have as you make those plans. Just some info about cremation. Cremation has really gotten a lot more popular over the last 30 years, I would say. I mean, my dad was old school. He did not want to be cremated. He had a fear of burning, even though it was like, but you're not there, right? But it was, I don't know if he thought he would wake up and be found in that place. But cremation is, I will say, I don't want to. There are benefits to any way that your body is disposed. Cremation is the most adaptable in terms of when you plan your funeral, and then also how you dispose of your remains, right? So here at St. Margaret's, we have a memorial garden. Many of you know that, and some of you may not know that. We are having conversations about how to expand that memorial garden, because as of right now, if you turn around and look out the window, it really is just a strip of grass that goes along the left side of this sidewalk. And then people's names are put on the plaque that's on the wall back there. But we are Buildings and Grounds. We are looking at how to partly why we cut those bushes down, where it was to expand and to make a place for more people, and maybe even consider some different options for how we inter the ashes in that space. So maybe in addition to scattering, we also maybe think of plots where people can pour their ashes into one central place. And again, all of those are great ways to dispose of your remains. There's no right or wrong. It's really what you want, right? We've had people who have said, "Oh, I don't want to be scattered there because I don't want to blow down Noonan Street." And it's like, okay, but certainly we try to do that a little bit more respectfully so that people aren't just blowing everywhere. But if that's a fear of you, if you don't want to blow down Noonan Street, we can figure out a way to have you dig a hole and inter you in there. So
sprinkler system.
Do what?
Put in a sprinkler system.
Yeah, right. There you go. That's right. Yeah. Also, and the other thought process around either cremation or not is a good question to ask Keith Hancock when he's here from Allman about cost and all that stuff. Those are things I don't necessarily know. So, of course, also donating your body, your remains, organ and tissue donations. Those are all wonderful things that we think is included in the mind of God when God talks about resurrection, right? Like even our remains can be used for the benefit of someone else. And so there's parts of us that live on literally as we go forward as well. So also be thinking of that too, as you think about that. So certainly I would hope that you would think that before the time of death would be the time to call the church. But certainly when a death happens, one of the first people you should call, and especially, always is me, Julie, the church office. However you can get to us. We want to know about a death. So So please, and then we want to sit down with you and work and walk with you through that and take some of the burden off of you as you continue to make all the plans that you have to make. It does say here, baptized Christians are properly buried from the church. But baptism is not we will bury anybody. It doesn't mean that this doesn't mean that unbaptized people are, that we can't have a service in the church if you're unbaptized. But the thought process is that if you are baptized, this is your church home, and we want to use this church home to facilitate your liturgy. And of course, the other thing too, there are always pastoral reasons. Pastoral things trump anything as far as I'm concerned. And what I mean by that is, to me, pastoral things trump the prayer book. So if there's, some need that has to be done in your funeral, or something that might rub up against the rubrics in some way, ultimately, we're going to do what you want and your family want to do as much as we can, right? Now, there are some things like, if you want to have Here Comes the Sun played at your funeral, if there was a really good pastoral reason for that, then yes, we could do that. But most of the time, probably not. So that.
You wanted to change it to SON?
Oh, here comes the SON. I got it. Okay, sure. Okay, that would fit. That would fit. There you go. Also, just a word about coffins and caskets. They are usually closed during. Anytime I watch, one of the things my kids make fun of me, anytime I'm watching a TV show or a movie where there is a liturgical funeral, I am that guy who is nitpicking that thing and going, no, why are you wearing a purple stole? You would never wear a purple stole in that service. Why are you wearing a red stole? That's so dumb. Or why is this person's, whatever. But one thing that tends to happen in movies and stuff is that they'll have these open casket liturgical funerals, and you wouldn't do that. So just so you know. The last thing I'll just say on the next page, again, this is from the Book of Common Prayer, page 507. I love, this is one of my favorite things in the prayer book. It talks about what I just said about this being an Easter liturgy. But I love this last paragraph. This joy, however, does not make human grief unchristian, right? The very love we have for each other in Christ brings deep sorrow when we are parted by death. Jesus himself wept at the grave of his friend Lazarus. Jesus even wept. So while we rejoice that the one we love has entered into the near presence of our Lord, we sorrow in sympathy with those who mourn. Again, setting up that paradox of joy and pain and all of that. Any questions before we move on into the actual liturgy? So really the first thing you want to do is you want to get your prayer book out, and you want to, not right now, but because we don't have any right here, but when you get home, get your prayer book out and go to the burial liturgy. And be sure you're kind of familiar with it. Read those words, because if your loved one has died, you're not going to hear the words always in the service, right? This is what I also tell married couples, be sure to read the liturgy before you get married, because you're not going to remember it, or you're not going to hear it in those moments. Same with your funeral liturgy. Read through that. It teaches us so much about what we believe about this process. So this is kind of a worksheet that you are encouraged to think about and work through. Of course, be sure to put your full name and print it legibly, please. That could be really awkward if you don't. I would hate to misspell your name on your bulletin. Your full name that you want. Your date of birth. Of course, you're going to leave number 3 blank. right? TBD, right? That's really for us, so that when when you do finally die, then we'll fill that in so that it will be put on the bulletin as well. Number 4 says whether you are baptized, confirmed, communicant. Okay, and so you circle the ones that apply. I think you know whether or not you're baptized or not. And if you have a question about that, please come and see me. We can get that taken care of really quickly. If you are confirmed, whether you were confirmed or received or confirmed in another denomination, or if you were baptized in another denomination, you would circle that, right? And again, confirmation just means that you have made an adult public affirmation of faith. And then a communicant means that you receive communion on a regular basis, right? So it doesn't mean every week. So if you're going, well, wait a second, I haven't been there in a year or so. I'll be honest, I'm pretty loose about I'm not going to turn anybody away if they're not a communicant, right? But it's good. The reason for this has to do with the prayers that we choose in the liturgy, right? So if you are not a communicant at all, or you're not baptized at all, there are other prayers that you would choose to fill that space. So that's an important thing. And if you're not sure, feel free to ask. Stating what funeral home you're working with, and their phone number, that's helpful just to have. Again, number 6, you're not going to fill out yet unless you have some kind of foreknowledge that none of us have. So, any other questions about that? No? So then we get into the actual service details. The first thing that's really important is whether or not you're going to be cremated or not. And everyone needs to know, your family needs to know that. They need to know what your wishes are about that, because the funeral director is going to ask. And they're going to ask pretty early after you die. So be sure to go ahead and think through that, how you want to be, what you want to do with your remains. And also it helps us in terms of planning, because a casket just takes a little bit more effort than ashes do. So those are important things. Even if you are a baptized confirmed communicant in good standing here at St. Margaret's, doesn't mean that you have to have your service here, right? So you could choose to have your service really anywhere that you would like. So be sure to specify that. If you want to be interred in the memorial garden, let us know that. Those graveside services tend to they can be public, anybody can come and be a part of it, or they can be private. You can say, well, we just want to have our immediate family be there at the graveside, and so that's another thing to work out. But logistically, between the funeral home and us, we need to know those details so that we can arrange those as we do. Then you're going to choose your order of worship. Which one between our prayer book has 2 versions of the burial rite. One is Rite 1, which is in the more old prayer book language, and then Rite 2, which is the more contemporary language. And those pages are right there, so you can go through there and you can look. There's not a lot of difference in terms of the structure of it. It really is a language difference. So you can choose which one of those you would like. And then this one's really important: communion, whether or not you have communion or not. Now, there's a note there that says communion is preferred. It is like if I just made the decision for everybody, we would just have communion at every liturgy, right? However, there are a lot of pastoral reasons why you might not. Like if all of your family, are atheists, you may choose that. I don't know if I want to put them in that situation where they're, sitting there and everyone else is going up and all that kind of stuff. So, so again, there's always reasons for that. So you got to think through all of that kind of stuff. And the other part that's really important is, and I see at least two altar guild chair people in the room. We need to know that really early on, because it takes some setup, right, for the altar guild to do their work. There's a little bit of setup that goes into a liturgy without communion. There's a lot more setup if you have communion. And again, it's not impossible setting up, but it's just we just need to know that ahead of time. And then we get into the readings. Now, I thought about printing out all the readings for you. There is a lot of readings, and I have a file that has all the readings. You can look at the suggested readings. They are in the prayer book there, and the pages are listed there. And this is always something, this is either something that I can do with you. I have been with families and I have read through every single reading through that. And there's something really comforting about that for people. And I don't mind doing that at all. And some people just, they know which readings they want. They go through it and they pick them and tell. So, again, it's just a matter of how you decide to do it. So just like any Eucharistic service, even if you don't have communion, there are still, there's a first lesson, a psalm, second lesson. There's also an option for a second psalm to be read after the second lesson, and a gospel. So you can have up to 5 readings in the liturgy. You can also replace some of those psalms with hymns, right? So this is where the options start growing a little bit, and you go, ooh, okay. And some people get really overwhelmed by some of those options. So again, that's another reason to sit down and kind of walk through it. So the first reading usually is from the Old Testament. And also, let me say, these are suggested readings. You may have a very favorite Bible passage that you want that fits, that's kind of connects with you in a certain way. You can choose that too. Like it doesn't have to be the one suggested by the prayer book in order for them to be used. So, so you have a first reading and a psalm. You can also assign that reading to whomever you want. It could be somebody who is a skilled lay reader here in the church, or it could be a family member. It's a great way to include people. It could be a friend. It could be a former priest. It could be anybody that you want. And so, do think about that, and also give them the heads up. like we're all standing there going, okay, Pauline, get up here and read this. And she's crying and doesn't want to do it. The psalm could be led by someone separately, or that psalm could be led by the first reader. Again, there's options there. Second reading, of course, can also, usually one from the New Testament. And then there's also, again, at D, it says there's a psalm or a sequence hymn, and you can choose whichever you want. I'm going to get to the hymns part in just a little bit. And then there's a gospel reading that is read either by a priest or a deacon, preferred, and if not a deacon, a priest or a bishop. And so that one is usually reserved for the clergy to read. If this is the one thing, though, this is a liturgical rule of thumb. At a Eucharist, the clergy read the gospel. At a Eucharist. At any other service that's not Eucharist, anybody can read that. I could go into the whole historical whys and wherefores, but just know that that's why we do it the way we do. So even if we do morning prayer here on a Sunday morning, a layperson can read the gospel at morning prayer, but it is reserved for the clergy at Holy Eucharist. So again, it depends on if you're going to have communion or not, right? Then there is really, I need to go in. Every time I look at this, I keep forgetting to rearrange these. F and G should probably be reversed on this sheet, because the way that we do it is if there are family members who want to speak, I allow them some time to do that, and then I always come in at the end with the homily. With family remarks, a couple things to think about. It has to be short. Has to be short. You know, I mean, I know sometimes people don't know. They get up there and some people are good at preparing things and some people aren't, and they just kind of go on and on and on and on and on. It's really awkward to have to kind of be like, stop, like, we got it. 9 times out of 10, it goes really, really great and smooth. Everybody is always really, really wonderful. And then a homily is just a kind of a short way to kind of wrap all of that up, and to remind people too of that this is a celebration of them, but it's also, this is an opportunity to comfort them with the words that Jesus brings to us. And usually I will say probably no more than 3 people need to give those short remarks. So you can have, I'm pretty gracious about 3. I like, 3s, the Trinitarian kind of thing. But it's not really an opportunity to have everybody come up. If you want more people to speak, that's what the reception is for. And you can set up an open mic and have people tell stories all day long. I will say too, the other great thing about having family remarks or friend remarks is that there's a ton of services that I've done for people I didn't know very well. And it doesn't make sense for me to speak about this person's life when I have only been a part of it for a very short time. So that's another reason why I really enjoy that. It helps flesh out for me who these people are. And then you can offer the homily in that way. Again, other clergy people, I should have said that at the beginning. I'm telling you what I do. Whoever comes after me, whatever church you may end up going to, may do this all completely different, right? So again, if you decide to have your funeral somewhere else, or if you don't find yourself here, or you move away or something like that, like do take these documents and take them and sit down with whatever clergy person and go over it. And they may have some tweaks. They may say, "Oh my gosh, that guy was such an idiot. Why did he tell you that?" Which is probably true. So, then music. Okay. And there's a note here about music. First of all, you all need to know that Doc is part-time. He's a part-time staff person. Funerals and weddings are not part of his salary. He does that on top of, we have an expectation that he does those things, but he is paid separately for those. If he were full-time, we would take this little note out, and it would just be a part of that. But so their funerals are not included in his salary. So it is customary that the music director receives a stipend of $250. Another piece that's really important about that is if you want to go ahead and pay for anything up front, because again, you're not in a good place always to remember to pay, especially the music director. The music director always gets the shaft. Always gets the shaft. What? Even for weddings. Especially for weddings. And I can tell you a couple recent ones where that happened, right? And that's not any guilt or shame upon any of those people, but it just happens a lot. And so do the gift of that's a nice thing to do for the music directors, to pay ahead of time, and then we'll make a note of it so that it'll show that you've already paid for that. You can choose to have a choir or not. I will say that sometimes is a little tricky to do, because unless you have chosen hymns that are really familiar to the choir and to the congregation, but it's not out of the question, right? So again, that's why that option is there. And then there are parts, lots of different places to include music. There's a prelude. Sometimes preludes are really good things to add, like if you know a piece of music that may not be in the prayer book, or if you know of a special piece, or if you have a special musician in your life, a niece or nephew who plays the cello or whatever, those are really great ways to include them. There is usually not a sung procession. It's usually spoken. And as we walk in, there are two anthems. They're called anthems, but they're spoken anthems as we walk in. And then there is a sequence hymn. That's the hymn that is between the second lesson and the gospel. Again, or you can choose a psalm. And then if you're going to have communion, it means that it's going to add to the length of the service, and it's also going to add some musical options there. So you can have an offertory hymn or a choir anthem. Let me be clear about what the word offertory means, because I get this question a lot. We're going to pass the plate at this funeral? No. Offertory doesn't mean money. If you think that it only means money, then I'm going to broaden your horizons. Offertory means what we are offering to God. Our voices, our gifts of bread and wine, money, yes, on Sunday mornings, but not at a funeral. We usually don't. We never do that. So an offertory hymn is really just the hymn that happens at that moment, right? That the choir or the congregation is offering at that time. And then there's also places for communion hymns and any other additional hymns. Again, this is another way to, as you're planning all this, to give Doc a call. He's really great at this stuff and helping people plan. And sitting down with him, having a conversation about the kind of music that you want, is he gets no better joy out of that than to sit down and to help you walk through that, because those are the things that he loves. And then at the very end, there's a hymn at the dismissal. One of the last sections here is, again, ways to include other people in your celebration. First of all, acolytes. You can have as few as just one crucifer. That is typical. That is pretty typical to have a crucifer come in. You don't have to, but it is pretty typical. And to say who you want that acolyte to be, you could write in there, whoever the head acolyte is on the day I die, I want that person to be the acolyte. Or if you have kids or other people that you know from other churches that have acolyted in other places, have them do it as well. It can be an adult, it can be kids. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I mean, it could be anyone, right? Yeah. I still got 12 minutes. I'm gonna breeze through it, but the same with ushers. And again, ushers are the people who are going to be, handing out bulletins. They're going to be helping people get up to communion. They're not going to be passing the plate. So if you're an usher, remember that you're not passing the plate. That's one thing that you're not going to do. And so sometimes if nobody does it, that's a great thing. We work really closely with Allman. They've done so many funerals here with us that they kind of know the drill. So that's a really great thing. Lay Eucharistic ministers, if you have somebody in particular that you would like to do that, please list them as well. Pallbearers, especially if you have a casket, we will need pallbearers. So because especially as you're coming out here, there are steps at the front. So you need some able-bodied people who can help get the casket from the doors of the church down the front steps down the steps to the sidewalk and to the hearse that's usually parked along Coleman Street right there. Again, there's, lots of people that you could ask to do that. Any clergy beside the rector. The rector has the right to do all funerals here, but I also love to share in that ministry with other clergy. And so if you have some favorite clergy people, former rectors or former priests from here or elsewhere, also if you would, maybe another denomination, other denominations are a little bit more limited in what they are allowed to do in our liturgies. Like they can't celebrate Eucharist, only if they're Episcopal or Lutheran or Moravian or something like that. But in terms of if you have another clergy person you want to ask to give the homily or do a reading or whatever, or share in some of the prayers. Like I love doing that. So yeah, please include those people. And then again, any special music, again, that refers to if you have somebody that who's a great musician and they want to, you'll work that out with Doc, but you'll kind of put it here just because it, as we're doing the bulletin, we list all the people that are the participants in that liturgy. And so that's another piece there. This is just a practical one. How many rows in the nave should we reserve, right? For your family and for other guests. Usually you can probably squeeze in 6 or 7 are real small people. So you can get comfortably 5. It's really comfortably 5. George is right about that. We can have people sitting on their laps and things like that if you want to squeeze in, but 5 is more accurate. And then also if you would like to have that service live streamed, that's just another added thing that we have to prepare for and bring somebody in to do that specifically. And so we do ask for $100 just to compensate those people for their time as well. And because we are in this post-COVID time, that of course has been something that has been needed more and more because travel, some people can't make it, so they want to be able to watch the liturgy as well. So flowers, if you have any special, like if you love cactus and you really want a cactus there, I mean, I've never heard of that, but if you have a special flower request, please put that in there. We work with a particular florist to do that. And sometimes most of the time, those flowers, because most funerals happen on Saturdays, we tend to kind of keep them over until the next day. But every once in a while, it will happen where somebody has signed up on our flower list for that Sunday. So in that regard, sometimes we'll get those flowers and we'll give them to the family to go ahead and take. And so sometimes there's just a collision, right, between flowers. So that's kind of how that works. There's a note again about where the flowers go, really just behind the Rite table where those 2 urns are. That's typically all we do. There's lots of other places for flowers in the parish hall, other places, that kind of thing. So there's that. And then also in lieu of flowers, you can make donations to St. Margaret's, to any charity of your choice. Be sure to put that and make sure that is listed so that when whoever is writing your obituary can include that as well. That's a great way to, and you can your family can designate that. So if you want to have the Randy Denman Memorial, parish hall, then you can say that our donations are going to go to the Randy to the Randy Denman Memorial Parish Hall. All right. Receptions. We do, especially for people who have deep connections here in the congregation, but even sometimes it's a pastoral thing to offer space for people to gather, right? And so, and that's the great thing about having a parish hall, is that we can offer the space for people to have a reception as well. So, but any, that takes a whole nother set of planning. So again, if that's something that you desire, it's good to know that early on, so that we can get the proper people to help make that happen. And then the last thing is, there are some specific requests that can be made if you are a veteran, if you have any, if you have any other cultural traditional requests as part of your liturgy. Sometimes we have to figure out where to sometimes put that. Sometimes that happens at the gravesite. Sometimes that happens, in the liturgy. But it's helpful to know, what that is as well. So, all right, we have time for just a couple of, maybe one or two questions real quick, if anybody has any. Well, oh, if you have any, if you want to give a gift in lieu of flowers, but you want to give to a certain, you can either give to St. Margaret's, you can give it to St. Margaret's Community Outreach, you can give it to, Salvation Army, you can give it to Humane Society, whoever you want. But just so that we know that, we usually put that in the bulletin as well. Megan?
Now.
Yeah.
And like, we die like 50 years old.
Yeah.
Well, I will be reported.
Yeah. Yeah. So then we'll tell your family, oh yeah, back in 2023, Megan was so dutiful. She wanted to save y'all the $250. So yeah. And guess what? Prices go up over time. So yeah. So inflation. So get that money in earlier. So yeah.
Do we allow recorded during the burial service?
Typically, no. I mean, again, if there was a real pastoral reason, then we could make that, but we tend not to. We tend to do it.
I don't think we have enough room for the mom and pap not to choir.
We're a little worried about.
Oh, well, we'll have to just find another venue then, I guess.
That's right.
Lizanne?
You need to like do everyone is first.
Yes.
You don't know the station.
Yep. Yeah, so if you want to have, that'd be something to talk to Keith about. If you want to have your visitation, you can have that here before the service. Then have the service. You can do everything right here. That's one of the great things about having the space that we have, but two, being right next door to Almond, right? Like that is such a huge and wonderful thing. So yeah, you don't have to have a visitation. You don't even have to have a visitation if you don't want. So yeah, there's lots of different options around that. So good question. Anything else?
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
It's a question. My mom made me do this with her 10 years before she died. And I didn't want to do it. I rebelled and she says, no, we're doing it.
Yeah.
And she died, when she died not where we made the plans for, but in another country. And it made it so easy. She put it on a disc. And all I did was take the disc with me and say, here are her plans.
Yeah.
And everything just fell into place.
That's great.
I know the value of this.
I mean, just to be real with y'all, I mean, we're working on this right now with my mom. I mean, she has, again, she's kind of one of those people. It's like, oh, whatever you did for dad, do for me. But like, we need to still walk through this. And even my sisters, again, we were all raised by a funeral director. And we are still reticent to have this conversation, right? And I'm, so it is hard, but it's so important. So be here next week for Linda. She's going to talk about, come with your legal questions about anything legal. And then Keith will be here the week after that, and then Ketty the week after that. So, and again, we're going to try to record all of them. So even if you're not here, you can kind of see everything. So, okay. Yeah.
All flowers, I know they're taken off. Before it goes down there, and I don't think a lot of people understand that.
Yeah.
Flowers are not always they're not the big parts of the.
That's right. That's right. Usually flowers are not kept on the casket during just the pall. Yep. I think it's just the pall. Because I think the flag, I mean, it's been a while since I've done a military funeral, but I think the flag is folded up and given to the family. And that's usually at the burial, right? So, All right, I got to go do another service, y'all.
Can I have
Thanks.
one of these for John?
Yeah. If you didn't get one, please get one. And again, if we run out, we can give more later. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I was